Hello and welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute privilege to be joined by the fabulous Danita Cummins. Danita, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Fabulous. I'm so looking forward to this, and thank you so much for getting up so early to come and join us. But before we get stuck in, let me share a little bit more about you with the audience in case they don't know you yet. So Danita is a seasoned career and business coach specialising in empowering leaders to launch impactful programs and overcome barriers to success. With nearly 30 years experience in the Department of Defence, she's led teams across diverse sectors from special operations to cutting edge technology deployments. Danita's coaching approach goes beyond the conventional, offering tailored solutions for today's dynamic business landscapes. Whether it's strategic planning, career development, defence acquisition, or non-profit management, she brings extensive expertise in managing multi-billion-dollar programs and international teams. Passionate about creating transformative experiences, Danita empowers leaders to make a positive impact. She hosts the podcast, Entrusted to Lead, where she delves into the leadership through faith-driven values. And as founding director of the Alpha Life Pregnancy Centre, she leads teams serving women navigating pregnancy decisions, parenting, adoption, and infant loss. I mean, wow, what a lot. I think that's a lot to pack in. Can you bring that to life for us a little bit more, Danita, and share with us your journey so far?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I think I like to tell people that it's just been an evolution of doors opening and doors closing. Sometimes when I do mentoring or when I have conversations with friends over coffee, they're like, "How did you get here?" And I'm like, I don't know, just a really faith in a really good, kind of like life algorithm, I guess. But so I am originally from Oklahoma, joined the military straight out of high school. Kind of grew up in a little bit of contentious spaces. So, there's all of those things that we navigate, just emotional healing and kind of resiliency and things. And then was married, divorced, remarried again. My husband retired from the military. So I spent a good bit of extra years after I got out as a military service member as a defense contractor, which enabled me to kind of, flow and navigate through a variety of different positions, different jobs. It was kind of one of those things like we were moving again. So you kind of have to reinvent yourself and start over. We have 4 kids and all but one are launched into the world, and we have 2 beautiful granddaughters. And so we're kind of entering this next season of, of being parents of grown children, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so I navigated my military career and civilian career, and then worked for the Department of Army as a civilian for a few years. And then, like many people, I lost jobs during COVID. We had shutdowns, we had different things. So had to kind of navigate those experiences, which enabled me to be where I am today as a consultant and coach. I really have a heart for founders. As a founder of a nonprofit and as an entrepreneur, I've just always have this heart for the person that's like trying to bring this idea to life. They're like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and they're really struggling to they have this beautiful idea or passion that they're trying to bring to the world. So I have a great empathy for those people. And now I have the chance to kind of come alongside them and, help grow those. And then for about 13 years, I've served in bivocational ministry, like you mentioned. So through some of my own experiences with unplanned pregnancy and different things, I started serving in the pregnancy help ministry several years ago. And that's just been a beautiful evolution of hard things and beautiful things all wrapped up together, in this thing we called life. So that's another part where my entrepreneurial heart is, just being a founder, going through being in the trenches every day. Helping families kind of rebuild, helping women see their identity, their faith. Faith is a big piece of my life. And so that's really kind of the catalyst for what I do today, is trying to see that infusion of our faith in all the aspects of who we are, right? We kind of compartmentalize and segment things, but the beautiful thing about faith is like it lives through all of you. And so it's just this new kind of season that I'm on where I'm trying to help bring that together, in leadership and business and kind of where we work and serve as humans. So that's kind of big picture where we are. Yeah.
I love it. And I think life does give us more than the odd plot twist, doesn't it? And I think they're the bits that they're always where the greatest growth is. And life's taught me anything, it's that everything in it is a lesson, a blessing, or both. And therefore, when I don't feel blessed, I look for the lesson, and there's the blessing wrapped up in there. Because as you say, the faith piece runs through all aspects of us and gives us that resilience, doesn't it? In those moments where it all feels too much, it all feels like it can't be overcome. And I think that you're taking your entrepreneurial piece and applying that alongside your faith to those different areas, because that brings with it, it strikes me that as well as being that heartfelt piece, it's that creativity and problem solving drive that is within all entrepreneurs, isn't it? It's the desire to solve something, to make things better.
Yeah, that's very true.
So what would you say has been the greatest lesson you've learned so far?
Oh my goodness, that's so hard. That the sun comes up tomorrow, and I say that in just not a flippant way, you know, just like there are so many times in my life where the door closed. I was just having this conversation with my husband the other night because I came home from a conference and I was in that, like, sitting on the floor in my office, you know, weeping, like, I can't do it anymore. So it's not all rainbows and like passion and hope, but there are definitely hard days. But I think the thing is, like, you get to this place in your life where you're like, the door closes. And so you have two choices, really, you know, candidly, at the end of the day. You can choose to move forward and open the door that's in front of you, even though you don't know what's on the other side, or you can just kind of give up, you know. And for most of us, we don't give up, even though we want to your point. Like, it's not all shiny and fun. It's not, it's hard. Life is hard. And there's a season of rest, and the resting, you know, that's super important for like our hearts and our minds and our souls. But I think that's the one thing is just like, even though there's a door in front of me, even though I don't know what's on the other side, again, my faith is bigger, right? I say faith is like a muscle. It gets stronger the more that you use it. And sometimes you got to use it in the hard spaces. And so that's the kind of the biggest lesson I think that I've learned is like, as long as I'm breathing, as long as there's air in my lungs, you know what I mean? As long as I wake up tomorrow, that there's hope. And I just, you know, trust and pray and breathe and open the door and, you know, and walk through and see what's on the other side. So.
Oh, I love that, because I think it's true. You know what? One of the things that I often remind myself of, this too will pass.
Yes.
So whilst I'm thinking that this is the end of the world as I know it, it's like it actually won't be. You know, we'll move on. We will come through that other side. And you know, one of my friends said to me once, she said, I don't understand if you're incredibly strong or incredibly stupid. And I said, probably both in equal parts. I said, but when faced with something that I don't know how to fix, I look at the one thing I do know how to fix.
Yeah.
And I cling to that like the life raft in the messy sea of my mind and go, but just keep doing the thing I can see.
Yes.
Then maybe. And it strikes me that that's kind of how you're approaching each of the navigations, as you call them, is looking for the thing that you can see. Would that be fair?
I think that is fair. And it's interesting you say that, because I've got to the season of my life right now. You know, we've had several like losses, you know, we've lost a lot of family members and friends that are very close to us. And so part of that, a part of the piece that I think, like you're saying, is the grieving process, which we skip over. So there is a real loss, you know, like you're saying, when you get to the door, this door closed, that's a loss, you know, of some big proportion or small proportion. And we don't really grieve well. You know, we think grief is just in the dying or in the loss of someone, you know, but the grief is all the time, right? It's this constant thing that's always going in the background. You know, we're constantly lost expectations, unmet expectations, these things. And we just that's just always going in the background, and we don't give it the space. So I think there's that piece too, is learning to grieve the loss and let it be okay. But then the other piece too is in this season where I'm very much going back to the, you know, what are the things that I know to be true? And what do you have in your hand today? And we can all get super overwhelmed by the endless possibilities, like you're saying. What about this? We do that all day long. Our brains do that, right? Without even us telling it has permission, because it's processing all the data for us. But there is this kind of like anchoring that comes back where you're just like, what do you have in your hand? And that was a lesson that I learned years ago through working in the ministry and some really hard things. And it was very much, I came home one night and we had a family that was homeless and they had lost their house, and one of their children had passed away. They were just in a really hard space, and they were living in the van outside of our center down the street at the park. And they came one night and it was cold, and the husband had no shoes and they had no water. It was a really hard night. And I remember coming home that night to my warm house with my kids' 10 pairs of shoes on the floor and my husband making dinner. And I cried all the way home. And I walked in and I got there and my husband was like, "A hard night, huh?" And I said, yeah, it's really hard, And I told him the story, as I sat with him at dinner. And at the end of it, he said, "Did you give them everything that you had, Danita?" And I said, "Yeah, I gave them everything I had. I didn't have a homeless shelter. I didn't have a place for them to go, but I gave them everything I had." And he said to me, "That's all God asked you to do today." And I've lived in that reminder for probably 10 years now. Every time something happens where I look at the emptiness of my hands and I'm like, I don't have the tool. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the thing. And I go back to this. What do you have in your hand today, Danita? That's all I asked you to do. Just use that one thing. And I'm like, "Yes, Lord. Okay, just use this one thing today to help the one person standing in front of me, to love them well." And then, and then you just keep going. So yeah, I think that's where I am today,
Oh, wow. I love that, because we can find ourselves lacking in all the things we haven't been able to do, instead of taking that moment of gratitude for all the things we were able to do, because giving all the things we were able to do improved the situation. It might not have solved it, but it improved it. And that's such an enlightening place to get to, isn't it? Is to go, doesn't mean to say you don't want to still try and find solutions, but to be able to give yourself that grace that says, there was nothing else I could do right now in this minute.
Right.
I've given everything that I can.
Mm-hmm.
If I come up with something else later, I'll come back. But right now in this minute, and it reminded me of I read Oprah Winfrey's book, This I Know for Sure. I don't know if you've read that.
No.
And that's what she talks about. When she comes to decision, she asks herself, what do you know for sure? Or what do you know for certain? What are you absolutely categorically certain of? And so that really helps her stop doing the overthinking and acknowledge that she's doing what he wants her to do with what she's got at the moment. And as you were talking, it struck me that almost it's the same thing. You're kind of going, what do I know for sure that I can do? And then am I doing that? Am I
right?
That?
Yeah.
But it must come with some practice. For want of a better word, that must come with some practice. Because as you say, our little brains are, constantly talking to us, aren't they? Not always what they want them to.
Yes, exactly.
So how have you found the best way to kind of regain control of the narrative and say, well, that's lovely, thank you, but right now we're doing this? That's so
good. That's so funny, because my kids are big now. So I've had 25 years of being a mom. And so I laugh sometimes, we kind of have a family joke where I'm like, there's this not nice lady who lives inside of me. And sometimes she comes out and she's like crawling up the curtain, I call it the cat on the curtain. And I'm like, so we'll just put her in the closet for a minute. But when she gets out, she's quick. You better catch her, because if not, she can wreak havoc really fast. So it's kind of tongue in cheek, we're laughing about, but the truth is that that's really, a whole part of me, I mean, it sounds really good on paper right now, but there's still many days, like I said this week, where I'm like still sitting on the floor, like I can't do it anymore. But I think for me, there's a couple of things that I've done. One, I go back to my faith, and just in terms of like anchoring to the truth. And I've spent this last season, like really focusing on, I look at the nebulousness of the world sometimes, like, we talk about purpose, or we talk about these things, or we talk about suffering, we talk about these really hard things, and they are confusing and overwhelming. And we're searching for an answer to a mystical question that sometimes we're not going to be able to find. And so I go back, I've been in this season of like, well, what do I know? And for me, my faith is like, I know that the promises of God are real, and I can hold on to those. and they're very tangible, and I can read them and I can touch them, at some points in my life, like, the promise that, that God will never leave me, that there's comfort in my suffering, that there's grace upon grace upon grace, that there's endless love. Like, there are these things that I've just anchored myself to in this new season of my life. So whenever the world is offering all of this chaos or my mind is going crazy, it's a very practical, like, okay, peace, be still, take a breath, like, just what are the things that I know to be true? I know these things as his truth. I know that his promises are eternal. I can hold on to those, and then anchoring myself to them. And I do that a lot through journaling, like, that's my one best offer to anyone and everyone. I'm probably every week at the center when I'm coaching, I'm like, do you journal? And, and she'll be like, no. Or even with business owners, like CEOs or visionary leaders who have all the ideas, because that goes back to that, like, how that shows up in the business world. We have this, like, apostleship gift where we want to right the things that are wrong. We see the brokenness or the things in the world, and we want to make things right. That's a gift. But, from my faith perspective, that's a gift where you can see the opportunity, but the opportunities are so overwhelming because there are so many. So I sit down and I journal and I write it out. My husband makes jokes now that anytime I start to, if I have a piece of poster board and some construction paper and stickers in the floor, he's like, oh, here we go again, because I just have to get it, out. And yeah. So those are kind of the tactical ways, like breath and journaling and construction paper. Those are the things that seem to help me.
I love that, because I think sometimes you just need to, I often think I need to get it out and write it down so I can see it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds weird because it's me that's written it down and it was my thinking. But when I look at it and it's written down, I see it from a different perspective. And I love the whole breathing piece. I do this with my little girl all the time. Whenever she gets herself overwhelmed about things, and we use our hand actually, and we like go, right, breathe out and breathe in. By the time you get to here, you've found a way of kind of recentering to go,
yes,
now let's look at what's going on.
Yes, that's so good.
See how we want to do it, because we all have that part in us, don't we, that sometimes is like the touch paper and stand back.
Yes.
No, I should be calmly now explaining what we're doing, but actually not feeling that calm.
But I'm not. Yes. Yeah, that's so good. And I think the journaling piece I really love, like you're saying, is because if you do it over time, and it doesn't have to be a documentary, I think that's sometimes when they come to the practice of journaling, and I have a friend who created a spiritual circle journal years ago. And, she did it in a season of her life where she had 3 very small kids at home, and she just didn't have the time, and so she had to come up with some way to really, have meaningful time where she could get the thoughts out. And then she was off busy doing her mom things all day. So she came up with this model, which is very effective. But when you do it over time, you start to see the patterns. So like even this year in a season, our hard season, and I've been using her spiritual circle journal. So, I give all credit to Liz. But I just recently sat down and, it's getting close to the end of the year, and I'm able to go back and look, like, what were the things that I was struggling with on that day? I don't remember, you know what I mean? I probably won't remember 3 months from now why I was sitting on the floor crying, this week. But if I go back, I write it down, or at least I have this thing, I can start to see these patterns. And then I can start to see, like, oh, okay, this is a limiting belief. This is something that keeps, like this imposter syndrome, or this is something that just keeps coming up. Like, why does this thing keep coming up? Why does this keep tripping me up? And it's very much kind of the systems engineering approach, but to ourselves, So yeah, I think that's so good, because we don't really know. We kind of move on to the next thought or the next thing, and we don't really take the time to see the patterns.
Well, that's it. It's being present and intentional, isn't it? One of the things I do in my journaling every day is say, okay, who have I touched today? And by that, what I mean is who I had an impact on, that where they've said, I really enjoyed that, or thank you, or just what I needed. And I write those bits down. And then what have I learned? And some of my learns will be that it went better than I thought. So it's not always it went wrong. sometimes it can be, that went really well. And I spent 5 days worrying about it. So actually, I could have gifted myself those 5 days back and trusted myself more. And then what's my takeaway? So from every day, what's my one thing I want to take away? Because again, to your point, it's all about seeing those patterns and seeing where they form, and understanding some of the things that go around that go, okay, some of the pattern is in in how I'm feeling, or in at the time. The same thing could be happening to me, but if I'm feeling happy and energized, and that it's just a glitch. Whereas if I'm not feeling happy and energized because I've had a run of things going wrong, then actually it's the end of the world as we know it.
That's right.
Sit on the floor and rock. So I love that kind of like you've put in practices to help you to start to navigate some of those storms ahead of time.
Yeah, no, I think it's so helpful. A dear friend that I have that passed away this year, she was a therapist, and I give her the credit that years ago she taught me that every feeling is valid. And as I've navigated this journey, I guess leadership journey or coaching and mentoring journey in these different areas of my life, I see that so much, right? That our feelings are like a foreign language. We talk about emotional intelligence stuff all the time, especially in leadership. That's probably one of the most common topics that we talk about on the podcast, and that I'm really doing behind the scenes coaching and mentoring when I'm, even this week, yesterday, I was coaching a CEO, and we were just talking on the phone, and and he's like, hey, I really need you to keep doing the coaching thing, because he's tired. His feelings, they're valid. And so she told me that, years ago, every feeling is valid, but it will pass, like feelings are like clouds. They come and they go. And so I've tried to just stay in that space. Like you're saying, it's like a river, they're coming through, and you're kind of like, what was that? And you can grab it and hold on to it. Right. And to your point, you could roll around with it. You can stay up all night with it. You could do all the things. Or you can just open hands and be like, well, that was interesting. I don't know why I got so mad at that, at that meeting. Why am I so mad at my boss, or why am I so mad at or frustrated? And I think we owe ourselves that, just as humans, our hearts. I say that years ago, I realized how important our heart is to us as people. And just, we kind of wrap it up. We stuff it in a box. We abuse it. We don't listen to it. We ignore it. We do all the things to our hearts, our hidden hearts. And our hearts deserve, to be heard. And so I think there's just this grace of just letting us just feel what you need to feel. Don't hurt anybody in the process. That's never okay. But yeah, there's been such clarity, I think, for me, and such peace of just like, it's okay. You need to sit down and cry for a minute. It's okay.
I love that, because our emotions, they are all valid, and they do come and go, and some, we have to acknowledge them. You don't need to, then to your point, grab hold of them and keep them. And it's fascinating. When we were in lockdown, one of the things I learned to do was read micro expressions, because irrelevant of age and race, we use the same 43 muscles in our face to demonstrate the same 7 human emotions.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
And I did that purely to be a better communicator. But you can sit in meetings and go, do you know what's really going on in the room versus what you think's going on in the room?
Yes.
Because the emotion's there, we may as well deal with it. Never to call anybody out on it. Never to go, well, you look angry, Danita.
Right.
But to think to myself, if you're not looking angry, but if you were, to think, oh, she looks a bit angry, I wonder if this isn't going the way that she expected. So I've done it in meetings before where I've gone, before we carry on, can I just check, is this doing everything everybody wanted it to happen? And then for the person that's feeling frustrated can go, well, I thought we were going to do X. Brilliant. Let's add that in. Let's make sure that we have. Or if someone's looking anxious, going, before we move on, does anybody need this unpacking in more detail? So it's creating that psychological safe space. And that's kind of what you're doing with coaching, isn't it? Is creating that psychological safe space for people to explore that feeling and then go. It's like, that was interesting, and what have I learned from it?
Right.
As opposed to, I'm gonna put it in my backpack and carry it around with me.
That's right.
As I can.
Take it home to our kids. I had a gentleman come on the podcast, and he was talking about, as leaders, you're probably often going to be the topic of dinner conversations. at home. And so how do you want to be discussed at the dinner table? And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so profound. How many times have my husband and I had dinner conversations about our day at work, and they weren't always the most positive. So yeah, I think that's so good. And I appreciate the psychological safety. We talk a lot about that today, I think, in leadership for sure. And what it is and what it isn't, because there's kind of the misconception, I think, sometimes, like, I'm creating psychological safety, and you're like, but are you really, or are you just pontificating? So I do think that too, like, we are getting better, I think, as leaders at trying to create that space, but I still think there's a big opportunity for improvement as we go along. So
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, there's still so much more that we can do. And I think for me, one of my greatest lessons in leadership was learning to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because people are messy, ourselves included.
that's right.
We don't all flow the way that you expect it to. We've all got emotions going on, and therefore it won't always go the way that you want it to. So the only thing you're guaranteed is you will occasionally hit something that's really uncomfortable.
Right.
But if you can get comfortable with that as the leader, and therefore allow your team to have some confidence that you're comfortable in that place, and that's okay, that you're not going to join them in chaos.
That's right. Yeah.
Here I come. Too. And let's crowd in that together. And I think that they're for me the bits that I in the work I do. I try and help people go, right, how do we help you get comfortable with the uncomfortable so that you don't join the chaos? You lead people through the chaos, and I think that's kind of almost our next evolution.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, there's a course I took years ago called Crucial Conversations. Have you ever?
Yeah.
Okay.
I recommend that to literally every client. Like, if you read it, read it.
Yes, it's so good. That's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, okay, we have to get in the pool so we can have a conversation that's going to be a little bit contentious. How do we get in the pool, so that we can do that? Yeah, I think that's so important. And then the other thing I say too is, like, I think that leadership, other than parenting, is the most important and influential thing that you're going to do. And leadership is not, it doesn't have to be big, to your point. You don't have to lead a Fortune 500 company. You can, right? But you're also leading a community, or you're leading a classroom, or you're leading your family, and so every single person that you have an opportunity to influence is important, right? Because we're entrusted with the care and safekeeping of other people. And that's a big calling, on our lives. And so that requires us to show up every day. Like you're saying, that requires us to do the hard work on ourselves, and I've over the years just seen so many times where it's like, this is work, this is business. It's not personal. And I'm like, I bring my whole self to work every day. Like, if I didn't get that job, I didn't get that job because I wasn't qualified. I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the experience, whatever. But that's deeply personal. I mean, that's my whole life. It's everything I've learned, everything I've studied. And so it is a personal thing, and when you've got a person on the other side of the table who's trying to do whatever it is, spreadsheets and manufacturing or whatever, they have a whole human life, that's going on. And I just think that there's so many opportunities to just take a breath and see this person, that you are entrusted to. And a lot of people do say, they're like, well, that's exhausting. I'm like, well, it is, but your hearts are heavy,
And that's the job that you chose to do, though, isn't it? Denise, I could literally chat to you all day, but I can't believe how fast I'm going by. Can I ask you before you go, if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be to have more fun, to just enjoy the moment of the day. Back to what we said about being present. There are so many times when I've regretted, or, I've kind of, browbeaten myself up about the things I said, or whatever, and to just kind of release those things and let it go. Because at the end of the day, it really, the person in front of you today is the most important thing, and that's really truly what matters in the world. So, and to love yourself. Yeah. Love yourself a little better.
I love that. I love the whole, like, always have more fun. More fun. And also love yourself and love the person in front of you equally. And I think that makes such an impact. So how can people get in touch with you, and who do you help?
Sure. Yeah, that's the easiest way is to visit my website, danitacummins.com. And I'm on all those socials, but the same thing, Danita Cummins. But my personal website is the best because it links to my consulting website. It, links to the ministry service that we do and the opportunities for that. And I will say there's kind of two spaces. I work primarily with small to medium sized business owners who are working on building or growing their organization through organizational growth consulting, strategic planning workshops, and then also leadership coaching. Then I obviously work on the ministry space. So the intersection of that is really helping faith-driven leaders, connect and bring all of their self to the world. So yeah, that would probably be the best way to find me and reach out.
Amazing. And we'll make sure, obviously, all the details, excuse me, of how you can connect with Danita will be in the show notes below. So if you didn't get time to write all of that down, I promise they'll be just below you right here. Danita, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so very much for coming on and sharing such heartfelt insight and actionable advice. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It has been a blessing. Thank you again.
Thank you. And to everybody watching and listening, I hope you found it equally inspiring, insightful, and igniting you to want to go and do something different in your world, to capture yourself in those moments where you're holding on to an emotion that you can just let go of. And until next time, take care.